On this week's Newswatch in Focus, it's been a warm winter. Why? And what can we expect in the coming month? We'll talk to Newswatch reporter Cody Smith, who will bring us a story about these weather conditions, and we'll also speak to some experts from Eastern Illinois University who will go even more in depth about the unseasonable weather. All that and more coming up. Newswatch in Focus starts now. Welcome and thanks for joining us for Newswatch in Focus. I'm your host, Kate Pleasant. Newswatch in Focus takes an in-depth look at the latest news stories from the greater Mattoon and Charleston area, as well as those surrounding it each week. This week, we're focusing on the unseasonably warm winter here in Illinois. On average, Illinois winter temperatures usually fall in the 20 to 40 degree range. As we've seen lately, we're on the upper end of those temperatures and even peaking into the 60s on some days. One weather phenomenon may be to blame. We'll talk a little more about that later, but first, Newswatch's Cody Smith took to the streets to find out what people were doing with the warmer temperatures. She filed this story.
It's nice. It's great to be able to come out in the park in February. So.
Yeah, I'm loving it. Yeah. I'm enjoying every second of it.
Pretty nice, be able to come outside, not be trapped inside.
Just everybody come out here and enjoy the weather.
Children playing, birds singing, and sunny skies. It feels a lot like spring. But wait, it's only February? And with this kind of weather, let's face it, well, getting a little distracted, it just happens.
We're supposed to be doing homework, obviously. Not going so well for us.
Whether your distraction is fishing, hula hooping, or even playing on the merry-go-round, with the sun shining, some say this weather isn't what they expect for winter.
This hasn't been a winter. It's just been like a late fall.
Temperatures may not be falling just yet, but experts say you might want to enjoy them while you can.
The Arctic air is bottled up, and eventually that dam will break, and so the burst of cold air will then plunge into our area.
With cold air usually comes a little bit of the white stuff, so if you're missing the winter weather, experts say hang in there.
Those who love snow, let's stick together, cross our fingers, put a cotton ball under the pillow, and it should happen.
I'm here now with Cody Smith, the reporter that brought you the original story from Newswatch. And Cody, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Kate.
Can you tell us what originally attracted your attention to the February warm weather story?
Well, it just came about with all the warm weather that we've been experiencing in the mild winter. It's been a pleasure for me just to be able to go out and not have to worry about jackets and stuff. And I just thought it would be a really good story to expand on so people could understand kind of what was going on.
So it's one of those examples of something that we find interesting that we know other people will too, so we bring it to the news.
Exactly.
Okay. And when you come into Newswatch on a typical day, how does it get decided what stories will go on the air?
Well, a lot of the times the assignment editor will sit down with our news director and they'll just talk a little bit about what is important, what everybody's talking about, and what they should cover. And we send in story ideas the night before, so they kind of go over everything, and it was just decided with this particular story that it was really interesting and probably the best thing, especially with it being 60 degrees in February.
Right.
So. And
we're going to talk a little bit more about that later with some experts. But right now, can you tell us what you discovered when you were out and about on a story?
Well, we discovered that a lot of people were really out enjoying the weather, even when maybe they shouldn't have been. And it's kind of hard not to take advantage of it when you have days like that in February when you're so used to 30 degrees. But a lot of people out playing or gardening and just really enjoying the day, taking advantage.
Was there anything that kind of surprised you as you were out covering this story?
Actually, a couple things. First of all, we were really surprised that we could actually really hear the birds singing. I mean, it was almost like spring and seeing buds on trees already. And then second of all, the amount of playfulness that was going on. We saw kids on skateboards rolling down hills and hula hooping and playing frisbee in the road. It was just a really lighthearted, almost spring-like day.
So it was an uncharacteristic day for this time of the year.
Definitely.
Okay. And can you walk the viewers through what it's like to do a news story in a day? What's the process for you?
Well, it's coming in, we usually come in around 11:30, and it can be a little overwhelming when you think you've got a lot of interviews to do. You've got to come in, you've got to line everything up, you've got to make the phone calls and get people ready to talk. You have to go out with an idea of what kind of story you want to come back with. But at the same time, you have to be open to changes, because when you go out, you never know for sure what you're going to hear or see. So really, it's just a process of being open to new experiences and being able to think on your feet.
And sometimes it's true that the people you talk to can change the story, am I right?
That's exactly correct. I mean, you may go out thinking you're going to hear one thing and come back and hear it totally different.
Okay. And so when you were doing this story, how was it formulating in your mind when you were coming back to the station of how you wanted to present it to the viewers?
Well, I knew when we were out and I heard the birds singing, and I had a couple people talk about, wow, it's February and it's spring. I knew I wanted to talk a lot about it being spring. But I also know that in my mind, in a lot of viewers' minds, when you come into warm days like this in February, you worry about what you're going to end up at the end of the month, or how it's going to be in March, or are you going to be hunting Easter eggs in snow? So I knew I was wanting to just kind of follow up with the sun and bring that into the story a little bit, but also let viewers know that, yeah, it's still winter.
Right. And so when you go to look for experts, in this case you talked to Cameron Craig in your story, correct? When you go to look for those experts, where do you start? Do you do it by proximity? Do you do it by familiarity? How do you work through that?
Well, I do it a little bit by proximity, just depending on where my story is going to be based out of. Sometimes we could do stories here, but we'll go to other cities just to get different viewpoints on it. So I do look in those areas, so a proximity way, yes, to see who's available and who would be the best to talk to. And then also it does help if you know the people, because they're usually more open to talk to you than just knocking on a stranger's door.
Okay. Well, Cody Smith from Newswatch, we appreciate you coming in and talking a little bit more about your story, and we'll be back in just a few minutes to talk to Cameron Craig and another person from the geography department here at Eastern Illinois University a little bit about this uncharacteristically warm weather and what we can expect also for the rest of February. So stay tuned. Newswatch in Focus will be right back. Wonder where we get our story inspirations from? Make sure to tune in to Newswatch every weeknight at 5:30 right here on WEIU to find out. Newswatch in Focus takes a local story from the week that was featured on Newswatch and goes more in depth. For more local news, weather, and sports, tune in to Newswatch every weeknight at 5:30. And welcome back to Newswatch in Focus. I'm here with Cameron Craig and Bob Cataneo from EIU's Geology Geography Department. We're going to talk more about this warm winter weather we've been having. So is this something that's average for Illinois during this time of year? It doesn't seem like it would be.
Well, no, it wouldn't be, would it?
Not at all. No, it's not average.
It's not average. We're in the mid-latitudes, and our winters are typically, nice 28-degree temperatures on a 30-year average. And so snow ranges about 6 inches on average as well. So, yeah, it's pretty warm. It's making some people happy and others unhappy.
Not so happy.
Yeah, it's we're running like 6-7 degrees above the long-term average, and that's a very big departure from what I don't know what we typically expect, but from an average. So it's warm, and there's very little snow that has occurred. In the lower 48, we've gone through. This is the third least snowiest year.
Really?
Yeah, in the lower 48 on record.
Wow, that's definitely a unique winter, I guess you'd say, that we're having around here. So what's to blame for this? Is it La Nina? I know people have talked a lot about that.
Well, I did the preliminary research on this about a week ago, and I thought it was La Nina as well. But then when I started looking at last year's January situation, which we had lots of snow then, about 8 inches of snow in Charleston, that was also a La Nina. It was a bit stronger then than it is now. But then I started, well, what's going on? And then it kept coming back to the jet stream. The jet stream is kind of hovering over us into the north as well. And so the Arctic oscillation, without getting too technical, is what is the main culprit here.
Okay, and what is that? Is it forcing certain, fronts and weather around?
What it's doing, it's kind of bottling up the cold air along the Arctic region.
Right.
And then basically in Europe, what has happened there last week, we had a huge Arctic blast for them, which the Arctic oscillation is kind of weakening a little bit. And so we can see in a week and a half.
Yeah, probably a change. That the AO, the Arctic oscillation, that has a lot to do with the position of the polar jet stream. Now, the polar jet stream, this time of the year, typically undulates, but for a good part of the time, it's down into the lower 48 and goes up. And by doing so, it funnels cold air down from Canada into the United States.
Okay.
But for a good part of this winter, it's that polar jet stream is at the Canadian-U.S. border. So the cold air stays north of there for the most part, and we stay relatively mild. We get a lot of air masses from the Pacific Ocean, which is atypical
Okay.
During the wintertime. We typically get air masses out of Canada, which are cold and dry, but with more storminess. So that's the AO. Got to blame it on the AO.
Okay, so we're not really blaming it on La Nina per se then.
Right, right. I mean, there's a small little piece of that that we
Yeah.
can say, but the AO is really is holding this.
Okay, and can you explain what La Nina is, just in case our viewers aren't familiar?
Yeah, and if you go along the equator and you go to South America and look west in the Pacific Ocean, La Nina means that the waters off of the west coast of South America along the equator are cooler than average.
Okay.
That's a La Nina. And so, and the El Nino is just the opposite, where those waters are warmer than the long-term average.
Okay.
And that affects the position of the polar jet stream. It affects the flow in the upper atmosphere. It affects it. And so the La Nina, like Cameron was saying, last year we had a very strong La Nina, and we had a bad winter, cold and snowy. We're having a La Nina now, but it's weaker. And so that doesn't modulate that jet stream as much. But there's different factors that affect the winter position of that polar jet. And so the La Nina, El Nino, the AO, there's another thing called the NAO. But the deal is, if you don't know precisely how all these things come together, then it's difficult to forecast. If you may remember that in October, November, they were looking at what the winter was going to be like in the U.S.
Right.
They said that from the northern plains to the Midwest, including Chicago, down to up to the interior Northeast, it's going to be brutal. Much below average in temperature and a lot of snow. Didn't happen.
Nope.
So
Made us all look bad.
Well, I don't know about bad, but
but good as far as energy consumption, less of that. But the fact is that we kind of have an idea, of a pretty good one, I think, of what the variables are that affect the long-term weather, but it's not nailed down yet. So obviously it's not, otherwise we'd hit it right on the head. So we got a lot more work to do. What do you think, Karen?
And another thing is that, people don't quite understand totally how someplace else outside of the United States can control weather here.
Okay.
And so it's like it's called teleconnections. Whatever happens somewhere around the world will have an influence here in the United States.
On the weather here?
Right.
Okay.
And so like 2 days ago, I called my Taiwanese friend and asked her what the relative temperature was in Taiwan. And she goes, oh, it's cold. And I said, yep, that's right, because it's warm here.
Right.
And so it's always, not always, but it's
usually opposite.
Usually opposite.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In Alaska, they're having one of the coldest winters on record, and snowiest.
I read that.
Yeah. They may have reached, I don't know, that's not official yet, but they may have had the coldest temperature ever recorded in Alaska, -79, -80
Wow.
Fahrenheit. That's without wind. That's not. That's
We
not
think it
wind
gets
chill.
cold here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've been absent Arctic air in the Midwest and the Northern Plains so far this winter, and that jet stream is it's going east-west across the Canadian-U.S. border, and typically it dips down, but it hasn't been dipping.
Hasn't dipped yet, huh?
hasn't
A
dipped.
few times, but not
Right.
significant
Yeah.
enough.
Well,
For
it's
a
never
couple
been what I
days.
consider a really brutal cold
No,
around
right.
here yet, and
No.
usually we've had that at least a little bit by some point now. So
Yeah, but the other thing is that people don't remember last year
Right.
or the year before that
With
when
the
we had
ice
negative
storms and
temperatures
the
and
negative
ice storms. And
temperatures.
they're like, oh, 23 degrees, 25 degrees. It's cold. Well, no, it's not that cold.
relatively speaking, no.
Right.
We haven't hit 0 Fahrenheit yet
No.
at all. Single digits above 0 is
Yeah,
about it.
we had 2 days in January that we had 9-degree temperatures and then a 10-degree temperature.
Yeah, so that's a piece of cake.
Yeah, sounds like it for winter as far as it goes. So do you think this is a trend that's going to continue through this month? Is it looking that way?
No, it looks like by mid-month, all the computer models and those that look at this very carefully think there'll be a switch, a change in the upper air pattern, at least for a couple of weeks, starting about the end of next week, which may shunt colder air down and more storminess in our neck of the woods.
Okay, so are we looking at possible snow?
Yes.
I know
Yeah.
some people
Yeah.
like snow, you
Yeah.
know, so maybe
We love
some of those,
snow, yeah.
You love snow,
That's
so
right.
some people are looking forward to that. So can you maybe explain what kind of weather patterns cause snow? How snow, how it gets to us?
Well, a couple things are the storm tracks. We have basically 3 storm tracks that we deal with here in the United States that influence Illinois. And to the north is the Alberta Clipper, and then which doesn't have a lot of moisture associated with it. It's more of a fast-moving, fast-developing mid-latitude cyclone. Then we have a Colorado low, which starts in Colorado and shoots through central Illinois or to the south, and that brings a little bit moderate, more precipitation. And then we have an inside leader, which really gives us, when the temperatures are freezing or below,
Right.
it is a low that tracks to the south of us, and that's when we can get our big snows.
Okay.
So as long as the cold air mass is in place.
Right.
Which brings up, see right now, there are blizzard warnings right now in eastern Colorado. Denver is
Okay.
getting hammered, so they're getting blizzard conditions. Now, the Colorado low, that's going to move east-northeast, and typically, and it's going to move to the south of us, which typically gives us a snow. But it's not. It's going to give us a cold rain, low to mid-30s tonight and tomorrow with rain, not snow. Why? Well, the cold air is not here. There's got to be a sufficient depth of cold air so that where the clouds are, temperatures are below freezing, and when the water vapor changes phase, it doesn't go into little water drops, it goes into ice crystals. But you have to have a sufficient depth of cold air. We're not going to have that tonight and tomorrow. So rain.
Rain, which I'm not sure anybody loves cold rain. I mean, I'm not a fan, certainly, but so that's something that we're going to have this next couple of weeks. But do you think we'll ever get that big giant snow this winter?
That's hard. Yeah, cross the fingers. That's hard to say. That's hard to say. All that we can say is for the next 30 days, the Climate Prediction Center is saying that we'll have significantly above average temperature for the month of February. So, but that doesn't mean that we're going to have all days above normal. That's just periodic. So
there have been very, very big snowstorms in February and into the first week in March.
Right.
Even here, even in our part of the Midwest. So it certainly has happened in the past, no question. And so is it possible? Sure it is, absolutely. Is it likely? Maybe a 50-50 shot, maybe, but it certainly has happened in February, no question.
What I'm wanting to go back to is another scenario of 1978, January 25th,
I read about
26th.
that today too. It was,
yeah, it was 22 inches just north of Indianapolis, and it was blowing all over the place. And my brother was born during that blizzard because the pressure dropped so much, so fast, that those ladies who were close to their due dates had their children.
Wow.
So
I wasn't aware weather could affect that. I guess.
Oh yeah.
Pressure changes, atmospheric pressure changes can, sure. Well, you've heard of people saying that I have an ankle, not an uncle, but an ankle that predicts weather when the pressure is dropping, his or her ankle hurts. And yeah, so when there are rapid pressure changes,
it does affect people.
Yeah, it can affect your.
Is that the same with headaches and things? I've heard people say I'm getting a headache. A lot of times I have a headache, and can that be pressure related?
It can be if the pressure changes are rapid. If they're relatively slow changes, probably not. But if you have a big storm moving in and the pressure will drop very quickly over a short period of time, then those that are prone to headaches from pressure changes would be affected. Sure.
Well, a nice example would be taking off in an airplane, where you're changing pressure quickly. Or going downhill or uphill in a vehicle.
Okay.
So
it's kind of similar that way.
Yeah.
Okay. And a phenomenon that a lot of people talk about around here, and I've noticed it too, is it seems like when we get rain, snow, tornadoes, anything like that, it almost seems to go around Charleston. And I know Cameron and I were talking about this the other day. Is there any specific explanation for that? I've had a lot of people mention it.
The only thing that I can think of, which would be something that I research after I finish my PhD, would be the topography.
Okay.
We're kind of at the edge of the moraine from the 18,000 years ago, the glacier. But I think it has a lot to do with the terrain that kind of helps to break up some systems that are not strong.
Okay.
So,
and do you know how it does that? Like what is it?
Well, you've got with the topographic change, elevation change, you can have winds that move up, slightly from the incline. But yeah, only with systems that are weak in nature.
Okay.
So
Something
I know
that
I
wasn't-
always get, we're going to have severe thunderstorms in Terre Haute or Charleston, and then all of a sudden it goes around, and I'm like, what? Now I look like an idiot.
Yeah.
Well, you do have them everywhere else, it seems like that at that time. I mean, they're coming and they do hit Mattoon sometimes and not here and not
Sure.
Terre Haute
Right.
and things. So
But change in elevation also related to pressure changes. The lower you go, the greater is the atmospheric pressure.
okay.
Yeah, pressure increases as atmospheric pressure increases as you go down, decreases as you go up.
Okay.
So pressure changes would affect that as well. But there are people that say, well, tornadoes, severe weather, never hit cities. That's not the case. They can and they do. The cities there's no magic in an urban area that would prevent. Not that one would want that would prevent a tornado from going over an urban. It happens. Look at Joplin, Missouri.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and then some students think that tornadoes can't cross rivers, and I tell them that
Right.
tornadoes are not vampires. So they will, and tornadoes occur in mountainous areas as well.
Okay, so there's no place that's necessarily exempt from something
Exactly.
like that. Okay,
Exactly.
weather is everywhere.
That's right. That's right.
Are we seeing more extremes in temperatures now? I mean, it's been a warmer winter, and is that, are we seeing more extremes per season?
Well, for 2011, we were 11 inches above average, and with temperature, we were, I believe, 5 degrees above the average. So that's just 1 year. As far as extremes, yeah, we're seeing more extremes, but without crunching those numbers.
And that goes along with as the planet warms, and it is warming. The planet is warming. As the planet warms, there will be more extremes, more droughts, more floods, more blizzards, more extremes. There will be, and there's a general consensus that that's really the case, because the more interaction between cold and warm would bring more extremes. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's consistent with global warming, global climate change. In this case, it's global warming. Temperatures are going up globally.
So, the next question would be, what's the cause of that? Well, it's a natural process, but human activity is kind of increasing that rate.
Right.
So.
Okay. And, we've been talking about warm winter during this whole segment of this show. Is there really any disadvantages to having warmer temperatures over the winter that you can see from your perspectives?
In one case, what happened? You need to have a really cold freeze, temperatures bottoming out to get rid of all the pests or to reset the pest population. These warmer conditions are not killing off, the pests.
What it's supposed to.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So mosquitoes are kind of still lingering around. Yesterday, I killed a wasp in the classroom.
Really?
And, and it was, students are like, why is that here? It's winter. Well, it's warm enough outside.
Sure.
The other aspect is that vegetation is kind of, it's warm out. Let's do our thing.
Yeah, I've actually seen some buds on trees and things
absolutely.
like that, which is very uncharacteristic of January and February.
And if we get a 0 day or 2 or 3 days with single digits, that'll do them in. Yeah.
Yep.
Or at least it'll do a lot of them in.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you think that a warmer winter means anything for spring and summer around here, forecasting out that far? I know you can't
Not
necessarily.
really.
But
No, there's not. I haven't seen any connection. I mean, we could have a cool spring after a warm winter. I don't know. There might be some connections there.
The only thing is that what the models are indicating is that for the extended period we'll see more precipitation, so above normal precipitation. But to say May is going to be cold or May is going to be hot, it's difficult to say.
Too far away to
yeah,
say.
it's too far away.
Well,
if you're planning a wedding on a particular Saturday
Right.
in June, just flip a coin.
Right.
So.
Knowing how well the models have done back in October, November for the winter forecast, which was not very good. So you look and you say, well, should we have any more confidence in the models looking at spring and summer? Probably
Coin flip again.
Flip, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, weather is a science, but there's a little bit of
Yes.
That's right.
unpredictability to it, of course, too.
Yeah, because if you're trying to predict the change in any system, you've got to know all the variables involved that make it happen, how they relate,
Right.
And then be able to describe the system precisely now, before you ask any computer model, show me how it's going to change in a week or 10 days or 2 weeks. So you have to describe it precisely now. Now, we have a lot of data on the ground horizontally. Every hour we take an observation at thousands of places around the country. But the answer is vertical. It's three-dimensional. So in the third dimension, the only thing, we have radiosonde balloons. They send them up twice a day to the National Weather Service, maybe 100 places around the country, twice a day. They get a profile of temperature, humidity, pressure as it changes with height, and wind direction and speed. They determine that. But that's about 100 places around the country, and the rest of the world does it too. But that data density is sparse. We've got 3,000 miles this way in the U.S., 1,500 miles this way, and you're 100 places this way. How about weather satellites? Well, they're terrific too. They certainly add to that, but we don't sense that vertical part of the three-dimensionality, and it's just a matter of well, it's money, is what it is, you know.
Right, and there's always changing variables, I'm certain.
All the
as well,
time.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Cameron and Bob, we thank you for coming to Newswatch in Focus and bringing the warm winter weather into focus for us. And I hope you'll join me again next week. Until then, I'm your host, Kate Pleasant. Thanks for watching.